It was the summer of 2016 when I unknowingly stepped into a nightmare, one that would shake the very foundations of my understanding of trust, fear, and the darkness that resides in the human soul. When I first met Warner, I thought he was just another intern, awkward, eager to fit in, and full of the usual uncertainties that accompany a first job. Little did I know, the presence of this seemingly harmless young man would unravel a terrifying reality, one that would haunt me for years to come. At first, everything seemed perfectly ordinary. The office was full of the usual buzz, the clicking of keyboards, the hum of conversation, the ringing of phones. It was just another summer, another season of interns coming in to fill the void, eager to learn, eager to prove themselves. But then Warner arrived, and with him, a strange unease that settled into my gut and never left. He was different from the other interns. For one, he was older than most of the others, closer to my age, but with a disarming awkwardness that was immediately noticeable. His eyes seemed to dart around the room too quickly, as if he were constantly looking for something or someone that he couldn't quite find. He had a nervous energy that made him stand out in a room full of professionals who were already too accustomed to the grind of office life. I tried to brush it off. After all, everyone gets nervous starting a new job, right? It was probably nothing. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something was off about Warner. It wasn't just his nervous energy, it was the way he interacted with people. He seemed to go out of his way to invade personal space, to insert himself into conversations where he wasn't invited. His smile, too wide, his laughter, a little too loud, everything about him felt like an overcompensation, as if he were desperate to be liked, desperate to belong. And yet, there was something else, something darker that I couldn't put my finger on. As the days passed, I began to notice other things that troubled me. Warner would show up late every day, sometimes hours late, with no explanation. At first, I thought it was just bad time management, but as time went on, I realized he was never honest about where he'd been. He had a habit of disappearing in the middle of the day, vanishing for hours without so much as a word. I tried to brush it off. Perhaps he was overwhelmed, perhaps he was dealing with personal issues. But the more I observed him, the more I realized there was something sinister beneath his surface. One afternoon, I decided to confront him. I pulled him aside in the break room, trying to sound casual. "Hey, Warner, everything okay?" I asked, trying to mask my growing unease with a smile. He looked at me, his eyes darting away as if he hadn't expected the question. For a moment, he said nothing, and then he finally muttered, "Yeah, just busy. I've got a lot on my mind." That was the moment I should have walked away. That was the moment I should have listened to the voice in my head telling me to stop, to pull back. But I didn't. I thought, maybe he's just struggling to adjust. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. That was when I first noticed the way he looked at me, not with the curiosity of a friend or colleague, but with a kind of desperation, a hunger for something I couldn't understand. The days that followed only deepened my suspicion. Warner began to linger around my desk more frequently, always asking about my day, about my life. The questions grew more personal, more intrusive. "How long have you lived in the city? What does your family think of your job? Do you have a boyfriend?" I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't just asking to make conversation. He was probing, trying to get under my skin, to know things about me that I wasn't comfortable sharing. One evening, after work, I was packing up to leave when Warner approached me again. "Hey, I'll give you a ride home," he said, his tone casual but insistent. I hesitated. I didn't want to be rude, but something inside me screamed that I shouldn't go with him. But I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe he just wanted to be friendly. He was a fellow intern, after all. I was overthinking it. As soon as I got into the car, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't just the dim lighting or the hum of the engine, it was Warner himself. The way he drove, slowly, deliberately, as if he had all the time in the world, made me uneasy. His eyes flicked toward me more than once, as if he were trying to read me, to gauge my reaction. And then, he started talking, really talking. His words were not casual chatter, not idle conversation, they were confessions. He spoke of his struggles with addiction, his battles with his mental health, the things he had done in the past that he regretted. I listened in shock, unsure of how to respond. But what truly unsettled me was when he casually mentioned that he had been using drugs while driving, his voice tinged with a strange mixture of pride and despair. That was when the true horror began to creep in. I felt trapped, as though I were in a car with a stranger I couldn't trust, yet somehow couldn't escape. My body tensed, my heart raced, and the world outside the window seemed to blur into a dark, shapeless mass. We pulled into a park near my apartment, and Warner stopped the car. The air between us was thick with something I couldn't name. He turned to me, his face contorting in a way that made my stomach churn. He began to sob, but there were no tears, just dry, violent sobs that shook his body. His words became frantic, disjointed. "I'm so alone. You're the only one who understands me. You're the only one who listens." I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, locked in place by his gaze, his desperation. Every instinct in me screamed to get out of the car, to escape this man before it was too late. But I couldn't make myself move. The fear that gripped me was suffocating. When I finally managed to get out of the car, I didn't look back. I told myself I had done the right thing, that I had avoided something dangerous. But the dread that lingered in my chest wouldn't go away. It gnawed at me, growing stronger every day. The next few weeks were a blur. I tried to distance myself from Warner, to avoid him at all costs. But he was always there, lurking just out of sight, watching, waiting. I felt his presence in every corner of the office, in every room I entered. His questions grew more personal, more intrusive, and I started to feel like I was being suffocated by his attention. Then, the news broke. Warner had been arrested for murder. He had been involved in a violent altercation at a bar, and the situation had escalated into a deadly confrontation. He had killed someone in cold blood. I stood frozen in shock as I read the news. It didn't seem real. It couldn't be real. The man I had spoken to, the man I had tried to help, was capable of that. It felt like the floor had been ripped out from beneath me. My mind raced, trying to piece together the events. Had I missed something? Had I seen the signs and ignored them? But the worst part, the part that haunted me, was the nagging question that I couldn't shake: what if I had been next? What if I had ignored my instincts and let him get too close? What if I had become one of his victims, just another name in a headline? The guilt that gnawed at me was unbearable. I kept replaying the moments in my mind, the way his eyes had followed me, the way he had become obsessed with me, the way I had brushed it off as nothing more than harmless eccentricity. I had let him into my life, even if just for a moment. I had failed to see the danger lurking beneath his facade. I couldn't escape it. Warner's face haunted me, his words echoed in my mind, and the terror of what could have been still gripped me, even months after it was all over. The darkness inside him had always been there, just waiting for the right moment to emerge. And now, all I could do was wonder, what if there are more like him out there? What if I wasn't as safe as I thought? It was meant to be the perfect summer getaway. The lake house, nestled away in the woods, had always been my family's sanctuary. It was a place where we could escape the clamor of daily life, a peaceful retreat that sat by the shimmering lake, surrounded by towering pine trees. The house itself was old, with creaky floorboards and heavy wooden beams, the kind of house that smelled of aged wood and fresh air. Every year, we'd come back to it, drawn to its quiet charm, its comfort, and the sense of permanence it offered in an ever-changing world. That summer, however, things didn't go as planned. I had come down with a cold, nothing serious but enough to make me feel like I was in a fog, disconnected from everything around me. The rest of the family, eager to get out and enjoy the warm summer day, decided to go boating on the lake. They left me behind, telling me to rest and recover while they spent the day on the water. It was an unspoken gift of solitude, a chance to be alone in the house and finally escape the constant noise of life. But that quiet, that stillness, became something darker, something suffocating. I curled up on the old leather couch in the living room, a book in my hands, trying to lose myself in its pages. The house felt empty, too quiet, and yet, I didn't think much of it at first. The windows were open, and the cool breeze rustled the leaves of the trees outside, filling the room with the scent of pine and earth. It should have been peaceful, but there was a weight to the silence, an unnatural stillness that pressed in on me, tightening around my chest, making it hard to breathe. As the hours passed, my mind began to drift, but something nagged at me, an uncomfortable sensation that I couldn't shake. It felt like I was being watched, though I couldn't explain why. Every now and then, I'd glance up from my book, looking out the window, but there was nothing to see. No movement in the trees. No sign of life. Just the creeping feeling that I was not alone in this house, even though no one else was there. It wasn't until the sound broke the silence that I truly felt the shift. A sudden, loud crash from outside startled me, sending my heart leaping into my throat. I sat up quickly, dropping the book from my lap, the pages rustling as it hit the floor. At first, I thought it was just an animal, perhaps a branch had fallen from one of the towering pines in the yard. But then I heard a man's voice, raised in anger, coming from outside. The words were garbled at first, but then they became clearer. "This is my tree," he yelled, his voice thick with fury. "You can't just leave it here." I froze. My mind scrambled to make sense of the situation. Who was this man? And why was he screaming about a tree? There were no neighbors for miles. Our house was completely isolated, surrounded by dense woods, with the lake beyond. I cautiously walked over to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to see what was going on. What I saw was unsettling. A man, maybe in his 40s, was dragging a large pine tree across the yard toward the porch. He was muttering angrily to himself, his face contorted with rage, his hands gripping the tree with an unsettling intensity. He looked wild, his eyes wide with an emotion I couldn't quite place. As he dragged the tree, his body jerked with every pull, like he was forcing something that didn't belong there into a place it shouldn't be. The image sent a chill through my spine. There was something off about him. Something primal. Something dangerous. His movements were erratic, and the hatred in his voice sent a wave of panic crashing over me. I didn't know who he was, and the thought of confronting him alone in the house filled me with terror. I felt my throat tighten, the cold grip of fear wrapping itself around my chest, squeezing the air from my lungs. I backed away from the window, my heart pounding. What should I do? My family was out on the lake, miles away. I was alone. Completely alone. I heard the sound of heavy footsteps approaching the porch. Then a loud bang, his fist slamming against the wooden door. I froze again. My breath caught in my throat. He was at the door. "Let me in," he shouted, his voice filled with fury. "You've stolen my tree. You're not just going to leave it here." My hands shook as I stumbled backward, instinctively moving away from the door. I couldn't think clearly. I couldn't move. The panic that gripped me was paralyzing. This wasn't just a random trespasser. This man was out of control, consumed by something I couldn't understand. And now, he was at my door, demanding entry. I rushed to the back window, hoping to see the lake, to see if anyone was nearby, but there was nothing, just the wide, empty expanse of trees and water stretching into the horizon. No one would be back for hours. I was completely alone with this stranger. As I stood there, my back pressed against the wall, I heard his voice again. Louder. Closer. I know you're in there. I can hear you breathing. Open the door. The fear washed over me in waves. I couldn't breathe. My heart was pounding so loudly that it felt like my chest might burst. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to run, to hide, to do something, but I was frozen in place. I quickly turned and rushed to the door, locking it as quietly as I could. The sound of the lock clicking into place felt like a thunderclap in the silence of the house. But it wasn't enough. I knew it wasn't enough. He could break the door down, he could force his way in. There was nothing to stop him. I glanced around the room, my eyes darting to the small phone on the table. Should I call the police? What could they do? They'd be too far away to help me in time. The fear of what might happen if I didn't act quickly was overwhelming. I moved silently toward the back door and locked it as well. But as I stood there, hands trembling, my mind racing with thoughts of what to do next, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. His footsteps again. Only this time, they weren't outside. They were inside. The door rattled, and I froze, holding my breath. Was he trying to break in? Had he found a way in? My mind scrambled for an explanation, for any explanation, but nothing made sense. Let me in. His voice, low and guttural, broke through the silence. You're going to regret this. I ran to the window, peering through the curtains again. There was nothing outside. No sign of him. The yard was empty. The porch was quiet. I didn't understand. I didn't know if I should feel relieved or even more terrified. Had he left? Was this a trick? I didn't want to look away, but my eyes were too tired, too full of panic to trust anything my mind was telling me. Minutes stretched into hours, and I was trapped in that house with only my fear to keep me company. My breathing was shallow, my hands still shaking as I clung to the wall, trying to steady myself. When my family finally returned, their voices echoed in the distance, drawing me out of my trance. They seemed confused when they saw me standing in the doorway, pale, wide-eyed, shaking. They didn't understand the terror that had taken over me, the creeping dread that still lingered in the air. I tried to explain what happened, but the words felt weak, like they couldn't do justice to what I had felt. They didn't see the man, didn't hear his voice, didn't understand the way he had dragged the tree across the yard with so much hatred. They didn't see the look in his eyes, the look of someone who had nothing to lose. When I pointed to the porch, there was no tree, no sign of him at all. Just an empty, still yard. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. But I knew he hadn't. I knew he had been there, in that house, with me. And the feeling that he might return, that there were others like him out there waiting, watching, never left me.